All right, here we are in our last segment, and we're going to talk a little bit about bolts. So here, and we'll also talk about nuts, because nuts and bolts kind of go together, right? Like a wink and a smile. So our first bolt that we'll be talking about is called a carriage bolt, and this has a flat head and it's circular, and so you're not going to be turning this with a screwdriver, you're not going to be turning it with a socket, but it's got some special features that we'll talk a little bit about here. So to use a carriage bolt, you're going to drill a pilot hole. You're going to make sure that hole is a little bit larger than the shaft of the bolt, including the threads. So you want it to be able to pass through the holes without obstruction there. It just goes right through. You can use these bolts to fasten metal to wood or wood to wood or metal to metal. If it's metal, usually you'll have a square cut out on the one side at least for this square part here of the bolt to engage with. The top part of the bolt is square. And if you're using that in wood, it will make an impression in the wood, and that square part will keep the bolt from rotating in the wood. And so that's why you're able to tighten up on it without this part just spinning around. So we can tap that in a little bit here. And so then we can use our socket attachment to tighten the nut up on the bolt. So get that started off there and then go in the right direction. We're nice and tight. And you can see that has pulled in tightly there, and so that is fully engaged. Some good applications for that. Then we have a few other options too. And these bolts are going to be used in situations where you have access from both sides, right? Because you need to be able to put the bolt in, but you also need access to the back side in order to tighten up a nut. So you can't use a bolt in every situation, but there are a lot of good situations where you can. All right, and then next we have hex bolts. With hex bolts, you've got the hex head there, and so you'll need two tools to tighten this one up, because you'll need something to hold the hex part in place, and then also something to turn the nut. So this is where you might use your crescent wrench or your open-ended wrench to hold it stationary, while you can use your drill with the socket attachment to attach things on the back side. These are often also used in conjunction with washers. So this is a flat washer, and this helps to distribute the force over the surface area of the wood so that the head doesn't sink in too deeply. Because otherwise when you tighten up, it might just pull it right through, and you don't want that to happen. So the flat washer helps to distribute that pressure across the surface area of the wood. So another type of washer that we use a lot in conjunction with bolts is a lock washer. So a lock washer is a little ring that is split, and so that acts as sort of a ratcheting mechanism, so that when you tighten that up against a surface, that little lock kind of digs into the nut there so that it won't spin backwards easily once it's nice and tight. And so that's a lock washer, and you'd use that next to the nut in order to hold that securely. Then we have a few other types. This is also a hex bolt, but you can see it's got this straight part of the shaft there. So that would be used in a place where you want to pull something in very tightly, but you want this part to be able to travel loosely. And you might even be using that as like an axle or something. So something that would be spinning around while this is fixed on the other end. So some ideas for different applications there. Lots of alternative ways to use bolts. Another type of bolt that we have is a toggle bolt, and this can be used to mount things in drywall. So with the toggle bolt there, it's got a special kind of nut, and it's spring-loaded. So it's like that. And so it's a threaded hole that goes into. And the way that you use this is you drill a hole that's actually big enough for this entire thing to go in. And so we'll pick a drill bit. Probably this one. So going heavy duty here. And we'll drill through our drywall. So quick. And then you can pass that whole mechanism through, and you might need a hammer to tap it in a little bit. You don't want to go too small with your hole, because you don't want to cause a lot of damage with a hammer in the drywall. So I'll tap it through. Now you'll notice that like it kind of went all the way through there. Usually you'll be using this through like a metal plate or something that will hold it. So you would put the metal plate in between your screw and then the bolt end, and then tap the nut through. And you'll notice on the back side here, these wings have expanded now because they're spring-loaded. And so that is going to distribute the force across that surface area of the drywall and increase the load that you can accommodate with that type of bolt. Now the trick with these is that as you're tightening, you have to kind of apply forward pressure. So you kind of have to hold it out as you're tightening. And that makes it interesting because you need the wings, the butterfly wings back here to not be spinning around. If you don't have pressure, they'll just rotate like that. But if you have pressure, you can tighten it up, but keep those wings in place. So that lets you kind of see what's going on behind the scenes there. Now, if you're doing this, obviously you can't see the back side of the wall, but now you'll be able to envision what's going on back there. Okay. So we'll just tighten that up a little bit here, and I'm going to apply forward pressure with my finger, and then spin that, and you can see it's tightening up. So that is a toggle bolt. There are other bolts that work on similar principles, such as Molly bolts, and they work a lot the same way, but a little bit different. So that's our bolts.